Polish President Andrzej Duda has requested that the United States station nuclear weapons on Polish soil. So are we entering a new era of some sort of nuclear proliferation in Europe and maybe across the globe? Привit, or maybe I should have said cześć, since we're discussing Poland today, and welcome to Geopolitics with Connor Klein. I'm an expert in international relations. I've been living in Ukraine for many years, speak Ukrainian and Russian. Actually, I'm currently learning Polish. So I'm here to give you a more insightful and unique perspective on the happenings of the Russo-Ukrainian war. And this is a direct consequence of what has been happening in Ukraine, and in particular, the new foreign policy of Donald Trump. The Polish president has requested that the United States extend its nuclear umbrella to actually stationing nuclear weapons in Poland. Since the beginning of the Russo-Ukrainian war, neighboring Belarus has done something similar in requesting Russian nuclear weapons to be stationed on its territory. Moscow still controls the potential launch of those weapons. They control them, but they are currently on Belarusian territory. So now Poland is requesting something similar. They want the nuclear weapons as a deterrent on Polish soil. Currently, there are no nuclear weapons stationed in countries like Poland, the newer countries that have joined NATO. So what is pushing this desire to have nuclear weapons? Well, obviously, nuclear weapons primarily are used as a deterrent. They're actually not used at all. It's just the threat of having the nuclear option that can deter aggressive actions by a hostile neighbor. So in Ukraine's case, infamously, 1994 Budapest Memorandum, Ukraine had the third biggest arsenal of nuclear weapons. They didn't directly control them, but they were stationed on their territory, and they gave up those nuclear weapons to Russia along with other military hardware in exchange for additional security assurances. That was the wording used in the Budapest Memorandum, that their territorial sovereignty would be respected, along with other criteria that Russia and the United States and the United Kingdom would have to respect. And since 2014, we've had a very clear breach of the Budapest Memorandum, as well as other agreements between Russia and Ukraine about where the borders are, and just international law in general, that you can't invade your neighbors unjustifiably, use military force in a foreign territory. And Russia obviously has made a mockery of Ukraine's decision to give up those nuclear weapons. Would Ukraine have actually been able to maintain them? It was very expensive. That we don't know. But basically, they gave them up in exchange for additional security assurances. And Poland currently has security, I don't know whether to call it a guarantee or assurance under Donald Trump, but they have Article 5 protection of the NATO treaty. Poland has been a member of NATO since 2004. However, there are no nuclear weapons actually stationed on Polish territory. And Donald Trump has made a lot of noises since he started his campaign to become president, which was ultimately successful, that he mightn't actually defend NATO states if they were invaded by Russia. He may even encourage them, is what he said. And a lot of people claim that Donald Trump, he uses hyperbole. However, he has been continued with this rhetoric. Also, he has used a lot of expansionist perspectives with respect to Greenland, Panama Canal, Canada. He constantly refers to it as the future 51st state of the United States, and doesn't rule out using military options there either with respect to some of the neighbors of the United States. So definitely this has been a big cause for concern for countries like Poland, which in the event of a Russian invasion, similar to what Russia did in Ukraine, they would be to a large extent dependent on the response of the United States. And if the United States does not look like it's going to be such a reliable ally, it would be better to have an extra incentive for the United States to defend Polish territory, like the fact that it has a nuclear weapons station there, because they certainly don't want to see a country overrun where they actually have their nukes stationed. Whether they would actually fire them or not is another question. So we have the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons treaty, and Poland is a signatory to that, so they forewent the opportunity to seek nuclear weapons. And similar to Ukraine, they are dependent on their own conventional military, which they have been expanding. However, with the recent Putin pivot by Donald Trump, where he has changed U.S. foreign policy away from supporting Ukraine under the Biden administration, basically support Ukraine, but enough so they wouldn't lose in the Russo-Ukrainian war, but not enough that they would actually win. He has departed from the policy. We had the infamous shakedown in the Oval Office, a very undiplomatic spat that took place, which is unprecedented. It's absolutely ridiculous that that took place in public, regardless of who you think was right or wrong. And on top of that, more seriously, the United States cut off, first of all, financial aid to Ukraine, then military aid, it paused, and sharing intel, and also there were a few other additional issues that Ukraine faced as with respect to getting commercial satellite photos, because they were also apparently turned off temporarily under the pressure from the White House, and even getting replacements and updates for their F-16s, which they got from other countries as originally a US fighter, obviously, but they were also considered in jeopardy. So this has made Poland, as well as other US allies, reconsider their options for their own national defense, because if the US is likely, or they've already created the precedent of turning off support for a country that's actually an ally, and there were consequences afterwards, whether it was a direct coincidence or not, Russia launched a big offensive, counteroffensive in the Kursk Oblast, which is a small part of Russia that Ukraine controls, and took back most of what was occupied by Ukraine. So it definitely coincides with real world consequences, and countries like Poland don't want to be in a situation where the United States may behave in the same vein with them. Now, Ukraine's not in NATO, Poland is. However, the US doesn't look like a reliable ally, and they cannot realistically count on US support if Russia were to invade Poland. That is not something that looks likely immediately, because so many Russian forces are tied down in Ukraine. However, if Donald Trump was to somehow manage to force the Ukrainians into a basic capitulation with respect to Russia and force a ceasefire and put them in a very weak position, which looks to be his foreign policy over the last few weeks, then those Russian forces would actually be free to go and threaten somewhere else, presumably if there was a cessation of hostilities or a certain amount of them, and they may actually come and test whether Article 5 is going to be respected with an attack on one of the 3 Baltic states and or Poland. So we're in a very serious situation in terms of European security, created firstly by the Russo-Ukrainian war and Russian expansionism and imperial aggression towards its neighbors. But moreover, the recent change in foreign policy by the US is also pushing that. Poland has decided, or is discussing, leaving several conventions that ban the use of certain munitions like cluster munitions and anti-personnel mines, because they want to be able to reinforce their border with Russia. There's the Kaliningrad exclave, which isn't connected to the rest of Russia by land. There's Lithuania, Poland, part called the Suwalki Gap that separates that with Belarus, which is an ally of Russia under Lukashenko. And they were going to have to reinforce the border with Russia through Kaliningrad and respect to Belarus as well. They're increasing their army. They aim to have 500,000 soldiers. They are spending already over 4% of their GDP on national defense. That will increase going forward. They will probably enshrine that in their constitution. It cannot even go below 4%. They are also offering military training now to all Polish men of military age. So Poland is taking its security very seriously. So this will be an additional, I guess, security guarantee, or closer, an assurance. It wouldn't be a guarantee, it would be an assurance. It would make it more credible. The US would have an incentive to step in, because if they did have nuclear weapons stationed in Poland, then that would be a big incentive for the United States to defend the country. Maybe not necessarily fire the nukes, but make sure that Russia doesn't take the country and those nuclear weapons. However, the reality is that Poland has other options. They can also speak with France and the United Kingdom about extending their nuclear umbrella to ensure that maybe the French would station nuclear weapons there, that they would definitely guarantee that they would protect Poland with strategic nuclear weapons should they face an invasion by Russia, same with the United Kingdom. Or Poland could actually go and get its own nuclear deterrent. It can actually develop its own nuclear weapons. Now that would presumably take quite a number of years to do, but they may, and they certainly have an incentive, to start considering developing their own nuclear deterrent if they feel they can't depend on the United States, and maybe they can't depend on France, on the United Kingdom. So Poland possibly is going to think about getting nuclear weapons. It would make sense. There would obviously be consequences for them openly trying to develop that, like maybe Russia would use that as an excuse to attack Poland earlier, saying, well, they're trying to get nuclear weapons, and if they get them, then it would make it harder for us to invade later, us being Russia. So there are a lot of things to consider. However, in general, the weakening of the transatlantic alliance under Donald Trump means that a lot of countries are going to have to consider their nuclear deterrence and their conventional deterrence to future Russian aggression, and that is going to see a lot of investment into the military and potentially nuclear weapons and possibly nuclear proliferation across the continent of Europe if they feel they're not covered by the US security umbrella or the nuclear deterrence umbrella anymore, and maybe they don't want to rely on the United Kingdom and France. I've told it many times on my lifestyle channel, but I once had dinner with the former Estonian president, Lennart Meri, and at the time he told me that one day Russia will be strong again and it will attack all the former parts of the Soviet Union that don't do what it wants and are not in NATO, and he was very insistent that he would depend on the United States, or Estonia would depend on the United States to protect it in the case of Russian aggression, and he felt that Estonia would not be able to depend on its European allies like Germany, France, the United Kingdom in such a scenario, but they would be able to depend on the United States. However, fast forward 20 years since we had that conversation, and he's passed away. In the meantime, the airport in Tallinn is aimed after him. He must be turning in his grave, because now Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland can no longer credibly rely on the United States and its security promises enshrined in Article 5 of NATO for their defense, and they are going to have to look for additional options to try and guarantee that. So I'll leave it at that. Drop your comments down below about what do you think, that we're going to see a lot of nuclear proliferation. Will the United States actually station its nuclear weapons in Poland or somewhere else, like in the 3 Baltic states? Or will they do the opposite and actually withdraw not only their nuclear security umbrella, but even their conventional forces from that territory in a massive concession to Vladimir Putin and leave that area unprotected by the United States? Do pobачення, and see you in the next video.